Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Life Groups for this month of October. And I say welcome as well to all of our guests. We're so thankful to everybody, whether you're a guest or a regular. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. And I pray and I hope that everyone has a great time in their respective homes and life groups this evening across the city. I want to talk to you in regards to this thought of watch your mouth. Now, for those of you that were with us in Power Lunch yesterday, this is a repeat, and this is actually the same thing I talked about there. And it's not because I didn't have another subject, actually, what I had prepared to speak on for life groups. As I begin to compare that thought with this one, I felt very impressed to bring this thought to the whole church. So that's what I'm doing. Psalms 19:14 says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer." Now, we're living in a world today where it seems like no one really gives a lot of thought to their words. Nobody gives a lot of thought to their conversation. It doesn't matter if they're talking to kids or to coworkers or to friends or whoever it is, it's just kind of like open mouth and whatever wants to come out comes out. It seems as if the thought process is that as long as it is beneficial to me in the end, doesn't matter what I say. As long as I come out on top, as long as I'm the one that benefits in the end, I'll say whatever I want to say. Doesn't really matter to me. But words are important. And after all, we have about 30 conversations a day with other people on average. We spend about a fifth of our life talking. Men on average say about 20,000 words a day. Women on average speak about 30,000 words a day. And so words are important. It was said one time that two guys were talking, and in the conversation, the friend looked at the other guy and he said, "Man," he said, "do you resent the fact that your wife always has to have the last word? It seems like every conversation you have, she always has to have the last word." And the friend began to think about it for a moment, and his reply was this. He said, "No, I'm just glad when she finally gets to it." Words are important. We should be careful in what we say. We should be careful in how we say things. Washington Irving, the tongue, said this: "The tongue is the only tool that gets sharper with use. Other tools, you use them a lot, they get dull, you have to resharpen. But the tongue, the Bible speaks of it being something that is untamed. It's hard to tame, it's hard to control, and it gets sharper and it becomes more divisive. If it's used that way, it can become more of a deadly weapon if it's used that way. The more it's used, the deadlier it can become. The more it's used, the more divisive it can become." Proverbs says that the tongue can bring death or life. Proverbs 18:21. We know that the tongue can be used to edify and the tongue can be used to tear down. The tongue can be used to bring life and the tongue can be used to bring death. So if words are important, I think there ought to be some guidelines just for life in general, some ways that we guard our words and we make sure that what we're saying is beneficial. So we're not going around hurting people and tearing down people, but we're trying to build people up and edify them and strengthen them and encourage them. And so I'm going to give you 4 quick little guidelines today. Number 1 is think before you speak. This involves the brain before the mouth ever opens. I know there's a lot of times people open up their mouth and their brain never even goes into action, never even goes to work. But if we do it the right way, our brain should go to work before our mouth does. And we should think before we speak. We should be conscious. We should give forethought about what we're about to say. Think about what you're going to say. Is this complaining? Is this hurtful? Is this going to build up? And that leads to step number 2. And that is be intentional. So first of all, think, involve your brain before you open your mouth. The next thing is make sure that when you transition from the brain to the mouth, that you're not just letting out a careless stream of words, but instead be intentional about what you're saying. Be intentional about what you're talking about, what you're speaking. Number 3, James 1:19 says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry." I think James was telling us a very simple point here, and that is you ought to be quicker to listen and slower to speak. You ought to listen more and talk less. And I know it's easy sometimes, especially if it's something that we're psyched up about, if it's something that affects a part of our life, whatever, we're quick to, man, let me have my voice heard. Let me talk about this and whatever. But he said, again, make sure that you listen more and talk less. And then finally, when words do slip out, and folks, none of us are perfect. We all have bad days. We all have moments when our words, we never meant for them to be hurtful, but they turn out to be hurtful. We never meant to tear somebody down, but guess what? It happens. When that does happen, realize and remember I'm not perfect, and go to that person and talk to them and say, would you please forgive me? Would you please forgive me for what I said? I never meant to hurt you. Please forgive me. And finally, Psalms 141 and verse 3 says, set a guard over my mouth, Lord. Keep watch over the door of my lips. Perhaps a new motto for the mouth and for the words that we speak ought to be this: you got to get past the guards to get out. And what I mean is, again, have a guard here so that every day when you get up, and even when you're mad, in a moment of frustration, in a moment of anger, when somebody does something that is so hurtful, and maybe it's intentional or unintentional, and you just want to strike back with your words, make sure that you have a guard there, that they meet that guard, and that guard at our mouth, at our lips is, can't do that, can't say that. Those words have to turn around and retreat back to where they come from. Place a guard over my mouth, Lord. Keep watch over the door of my lips. So talk about that for a few moments tonight. Talk about the importance of your words. Talk about the importance of what we speak, being intentional, thinking before we speak, listening more than we talk, and asking for forgiveness when we don't say the right words. God bless you. Thank you for being with us tonight, and we will see you on Sunday.